the so-called STEM skills. My name is Gail Edmondson from Science Business, and I will be moderating the discussion today. We have more than 250 participants registered. Thank you all for joining us. This number is a very strong indicator of the concern about a shortage of graduates in these skilled fields. So how can Europe build a larger pool of excellent scientists and technology experts? That's our topic today, and our two guest speakers are working on the front lines to tackle the skills gap. We're very lucky to have with us Anne Glover, Chief Scientific Advisor to the European Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso, and Jan Moltveit, Chairman of Microsoft Europe. Before we start, a bit of housekeeping. Our discussion will run for 1 hour, starting with the short introductory statements by Anne and Jan. Then we'll move to a Q&A format for the rest of the webinar. And all participants are welcome to pose questions to our speakers. We obviously cannot open up the microphones to everyone, but you can submit questions using the chat box on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We have a couple of slides to demonstrate how to type in your questions. For those using voice over internet protocol who are having any difficulty with this connection, you can also dial in on the telephone number in the chat box using the PIN code there to access the webinar audio. The space for typing your questions is right under that PIN code. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand things over to Anne Glover, who took up her commission post in January 2012. Anne, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. And this topic is one of your top priorities. Maybe you can set the scene for us by saying, what's the problem? Why doesn't anyone want to be a scientist? And what will it take to create a stampede of STEM students in Europe?
Okay, so thank you, Gail, and an easy question to begin with. So let's set out what the problem is, and I'll give you a real example that happened to me. So I was speaking to a number of young children, so these were people from 8 to 10 years old, in a science center, so they must have been vaguely interested to be there. And I asked them to describe to me, what does a scientist look like? So there was a door, and I said, behind that door there's a physicist. And what the kids said to me is, well, it's a man, he's wearing a white coat, he's got mad hair, he's got thick glasses, and I'm sorry to all the physicists out there, but they said he didn't smell too good, that he works in a lab all the time, and he has few friends. Now, if young children from 8 to 10 years old who are actually interested in science, because that's why they were at the science center, if they think that that's what a scientist looks like, how many people would be attracted to pursue that as a career? So that's our first thing. The image of a scientist is a very poor one. The second thing is, it's actually impossible for people to explain what they think a scientist does. So people might describe what they look like, but what is a scientist's job on a day-to-day basis? And you know, the people listening can think about that. Is it easy to describe? And it isn't easy to describe, and I'll say why. People are happy to, or think they do understand what a doctor does, what an accountant does, what a lawyer does. But they don't know what a scientist does. They think it's someone in a lab who just does experiments and that it doesn't have any impact for society or individual people's lives. So we have, in my mind, an enormous job to be able to turn that around so that we can allow people to truly understand how exciting and enabling and powerful it is to be a scientist. Because, and I've said this before, as a scientist you get to invent the future. And there can be no better place to be in the world than inventing the future. And people, you really make a big difference for people's lives by being a scientist. And that's whether you're at the end, the very technical end, enabling experiments or designing experiments so that they work, or at the very other end, the theoretical end, whether you're thinking up the hypothesis and the questions that you want to ask. Now, the final thing I might say, and I'm not talking solutions at the moment, I'm partly just setting out the issues. That is that never more than now has our life been totally influenced by science, engineering and technology from the moment we wake up in the morning to the moment we go to bed at night. And for all the big global issues that we face, that faces every global citizen, science, engineering and technology are crucial in being able to understand those questions and also being able to deliver solutions for those questions. But yet science seems almost invisible. We use technology, but if I ask European citizens through Eurobarometer, do you like technology? Do you think it is helpful, makes your life easier? The European citizen by and large thinks, no, I'm suspicious of technology. I'm not sure what it does. So we have a huge communication gap where the people that are delivering this exciting future for us, who are coming up with options and opportunities, don't talk very well about what they do. And that's whether you're a scientist working in an academic environment or whether you're a scientist working in a business environment. We don't engage with citizens, and we don't ask citizens what do they want, what future looks good to them, what new innovations or what innovations would they like to see, or what questions would they like to see solved. We do not engage them and make citizens part of the solution for our future society. So the biggest challenge for me is for all scientists when they're being educated is that of course we must educate them in the specialism of the science, but that is pointless unless we also educate them how to be superb communicators so that they can of course get funding for their research, but so that they can engage with the people who are going to be influenced most by what they do, which is the citizen, obviously the policymaker, and also the politician. All of these people need to be shouting out for scientists to contribute solutions, opportunities, options for the future. So there's for me our biggest challenge, and Gail, I'll leave it there. See what Jan has to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne, for setting the stage so well. Maybe just one quick question before I hand the floor over to Jan. You know, you say scientists have a kind of nerdy image. In your term as chief scientist in Europe or also in Scotland, where you were previously, have you seen any initiatives that can really make an impact in changing the image of scientists?
Yeah, actually, there are quite a lot, and it tends to involve, as you might imagine, young scientists. So in many of our universities right across Europe, the learned academies, which tend to be the academies, and again, apologies to those that I might offend, but of, you know, old men in grey suits telling people what it is that they should be doing. Many of these really superb academies now have what we call young academies as part of them, which are the young scientists, young men and young women who look like normal people, who look like they have a life other than just their science, and also because they've grown up in an age of communication, feel very much more the pressure to communicate. So I think that that's one example or one initiative. There are lots of them. Some of them, of course, by the Commission, particularly on looking at women in science and how to get young girls involved in science. I really applaud those initiatives. And you know, there are also things called, and I'm not quite sure about the name of this, but you know, Girl Geeks, which are getting young women, particularly in information communication technology, where there's a real gap, particularly in this case of women, although we want all kids, not just young women, to be involved in science. But again, just showing the real fun, the impact you can have with your knowledge if you only talk about it.
Excellent. Okay, well, there's much more to explore here, and we will come back to the image issue. But I'd like to now welcome Jan Multij, Chairman of Microsoft Europe. Jan studied computer science and was recently appointed by the European Commission to a high-level group focusing on quality and excellence in teaching and adapting learning to the digital age. Jan, welcome, and how bad is the shortage of STEM graduates from industry's perspective, and what are companies like Microsoft doing to help reverse the decline?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be part of this, discussion. I would say this is a really, tough issue for Europe. And as you rightly said, I am the software engineer by profession. And now I'm 51 years old. And I give you one comparison. When I was born in 1962, if you compare the whole computing power at that time of the NASA, the agency, it's a smaller computing power than what we carry today in the mobile phone. That's the power of, the technology, right? And it's called Moore's Law, which says basically that every, second year, the computing power is doubling. And that's why we have such huge, involvement, and it's a driving curve. It's, in fact, exponential. And if we want to really drive, productivity in society, in an economy, we need to have more, STEM educated people. And as a matter of the fact, I give you some data points. In Europe, only 15% of graduates are STEM graduates, right? In India, it's 30%. In China, it's 45%. And today, you should not look at, different products as, like non-IT devices, because I give you one example, which is a very, traditional product. It's car. Today, if you take new Mercedes, there is 16 full-fledged computers in it, and 60% of the budget for that car is software, basically. So the car is no more a hardware product, it's a software product. So that means that if you take the pyramid of the skills in that, particular industry, whether you are servicesman at the bottom, or the scientist or at the top, or designer at the top, that pyramid will move fast, very much, in that way. That's why, we need to look at the STEM education, but the STEM education is a part of the lifelong learning, and we really need to start. I tell you what, we need to start in the kindergarten and look at some, countries, what they are doing. For example, Denmark, they are doing a great job with, Lego. They are teaching kids how to, use it, how to build the project and so on. And go up through the whole, life, up to the retirement. And that's what lifelong learning stands, for. What we try to do, and we can talk about, new type of the education and what technology can do for the education to build, better education in Europe. We try to work with, the local partners in a lot of, European countries. And our, umbrella approach is called Youth Park, which is the worldwide, approach, where basically we were concentrating very much on the youth, on the young generation. And our, promise was to train and give opportunity to 300 million, students and youth around the world, especially in Europe. Our, promise, our commitment was 30 million youth, basically, and we signed a memorandum of understanding with 3 big European organizations, which is Telecenter Europe, European Youth Forum, and Junior Achievement, for they are very much involved in the enterprise education. I give you now a couple of examples of the countries, what we do in the countries, and then we can talk more deeply in our discussion. For example, in Ireland, we were working very closely with the NGO called FIT, which stands Fast Track to IT, where they basically what they decided with cooperation with us to concentrate in Ireland in 3 big things: in mobile technologies, cloud computing, and gaming. And basically, in next 3 years, benefit 30,000 youth from this, program. The program was launched by the Irish Prime Minister Kenny recently. So that's Ireland. That's one of the type. It's like the youth helping them to get jobs in a very exciting, technology area. The other country, which is smaller than Ireland, is, Estonia. As you know, some people are calling Estonia as a motherland of Skype. But in Estonia, we are working in the project called, Smart Labs, together with, Skype. And there are like 36 hobby groups. They are working on the different projects in areas of robotics, programming, mobile application, web design. And these are students between 10 to 19 years, old, right? I would, stop at this point so we have more time for the discussion. So in net, to summarize what I said, first of all, technology is there definitely and will enable a lot of, industries. We need to make sure that we are not only in the STEM education, but in general in lifelong learning. We have rightly educated, people and equip them with the right skills so they can use technology as a competitive advantage. And the best way to do it, to really for the companies, is to really, work in the specific, countries for the specific, programs in very modern, technology areas.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jan, for that great overview. Microsoft actually has a number of really interesting public-private partnerships to boost science and technology skills, and you mentioned a couple of them. But I'm wondering if there are any lessons learned for people out there and people listening today about, policy officials and companies who might be keen to follow your lead. Can you recommend what works well in designing programs and maybe what doesn't?
Yeah, there needs to be what I call, bottom-up approach, and top-down approach. By top-down, I mean, and Annie, mentioned that we need to communicate what we are, doing, communicate the good stories, the best stories, what those, people are doing, if they are, some startups and so on. That's, top-down, and really push also governments and European Commission in that direction, Bottom-up approach is basically through, social networks, through the webs and so on, to really create, higher awareness, basically, and we need to increase productivity in Europe in order to be successful for the future. And it will be created through the, innovation on one side, but we need to have also the right skills. So that, I think that awareness building is very important.
Okay, very good. Well, that ties back to what we started talking about with Anne. Anne, I don't know if you have any lessons learned in your experience to date that you can share with the audience. And in particular, I'm wondering if you've been to Estonia, because it did really hit the headlines that, suddenly youngsters were being taught programming in school. It's a very interesting idea. Have you been there and have you talked to people about that?
So unfortunately I haven't been to Estonia, but it's very exciting, this teaching programming to kids in school, and actually it comes down to an important thing for me, and that's the value that we must attach to education, and particularly early education, so primary school and secondary school, because at that stage young people have less preconceptions. A 5-year-old is open to absolutely anything, and you're never really too young to learn. And so I'm very persuaded that what we should do is think about being much more innovative in the classroom early on, but we need to look to broader society to support this, because if you look historically across Europe at who's teaching in the classroom, then often, and I'll use the specific example that I'm most familiar with, which is Scotland, of course, where I used to be Chief Scientific Advisor. There, if I look at primary school teachers, their background is in the arts or history, philosophy, or whatever. It tends not to be in the sciences. And so there's a real issue in empowering people, our teachers, to be able to be innovative and confident in being able to offer those opportunities around science for their school children. And of course that you can do in public-private partnerships, which you mentioned, but even just more broadly, we should open up schools to bringing in the rest of society into our schools and using that as a real resource so that we can, I suppose, support our teachers, but also make education much more real and exciting for our young people as well.
That's an interesting point, which ties into something that in the U.S. the President's Council on Competitiveness has spoken to, with an idea to open up summer school to teachers in the sciences, and to, instead of having 3 months off, get them really excited about science and technology, and also knowledgeable. But coming back to the image issue, And do governments need to be developing video games or TV programs with scientist heroes to solve planet-threatening problems while advising the high and mighty? Or what will it take to bump the image of a star soccer player out of the head of a young student?
Yeah, well, I would say this, wouldn't I? But, any scientist is much more exciting and interesting than a soccer player or a football player, really. And I'm aware I'm now offending lots of people. But why do I say that? It's just because what an amazing thing that you, so let me just give you, a morning in the life of a scientist. So if I'm a laboratory scientist, I go into my lab. I go into my lab with my head full of ideas, and I have in front of me every possible facility to allow me to test those ideas, to look at the output of ideas, to talk about those ideas. It's the most amazing thing to do, and every day is different. But unless young people know that, how do we persuade them that that's an option, and that it's not that I should go and be a celebrity, or which, believe it or not, if you ask young people, that's what they would most often say as a wish for their future career. They want to be a celebrity. Now, I suppose if you try and unpick that, it's because celebrities get a lot of attention. Sometimes it's not obvious what the talent is that the celebrity has. They're often rewarded very well for what they do, but nobody thinks how short the impact that they have is, and what do they do for other people. And sometimes that too is very limited. So I think that for me anyway, the key thing is to get particularly our young scientists, to be much more visible. And that does mean that we get them to go into schools. It means that we get our media, whether it's our newspapers, our radio stations, our television, we get them to have young scientists in all their glory, what they do in their private life as well as what they do in their work environment. We need to have that rounded impression of what a scientist is, what they can do, and the fact that we can engage with them. Because one of the big problems for me is, and let me tell you this brief anecdote. When I was a PhD student, I went to a lot of evenings where you met other PhD students, and I would say I'm doing a PhD in biochemistry, at which point most people used to say, oh my goodness, is that the time I need to be going? Because they obviously thought that was such a boring thing that I was doing. So as an experiment, because I am a scientist, the next such evening I went along to, I said, I'm doing a PhD in Sanskrit. And immediately people said, wow, how fascinating. However did you get interested in Sanskrit? Which was a big problem for me because I didn't know much about Sanskrit, so I couldn't tell them. But the point is that for some reason, biochemistry, which is the science of how we all work, how our bodies work, how they go wrong if they go wrong, how we can fix them if they go right, every living thing on the planet is biochemistry. So that was deemed to be threatening, difficult, not interesting in some way, whereas Sanskrit, which is an interesting cultural investigation, a really valuable thing to do, but on the face of it you would think has less meaning for every single person on the planet. No. So there's the issue, is that we make science scary, boring, uninteresting, not relevant, all of these things, whereas it is the complete opposite.
That's an interesting point, and it also ties in, you mentioned compensation. A recent Panorama noted that negative perceptions about STEM-related skills included lower pay. So Jan, I won't ask what the CEO of Microsoft earns, but is it true that math and technology graduates are really paid less than other skilled workers?
I don't think that's the case, especially if there is a shortage of, such people. But as I said, there was an interesting comparison of, invention of electricity with IT, like 6 weeks ago in Economist. And And I believe where we are today with IT, where we were with electricity, like after 40 years of the usage, because the productivity gains were, going step by step, and then suddenly, because of the electricity invention, productivity went up significantly. And I think we are in that inflection point with the ICT technologies. But unless we will, increase the skills and STEM education, and especially, and I'm like having, my own soup, which is basically computer science, they will not be able to increase significantly productivity. And that's the only way how Europe can be competitive. Productivity, 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 right? And that goes through the, unlocking human potential, unlocking human, brains, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Anne, you'd like to respond to that?
Yeah, just because you asked a specific question there, the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK did a study, and they demonstrated that on average, engineers earn more in their lifetime than lawyers do.
Bravo!
So that's something to think about if you're
How about bankers?
That I don't know, but also in Eurocase, which kind of represents a lot of the academies, more applied technologies and so on, they've also done similar work. So if you are really interested in your financial reward, think about being a scientist or an engineer.
Okay. Jan, I have a question to you from one of our participants online. 20 years ago, graduates came to the U.S. and Europe to study and stayed afterwards to make a career. Now, increasingly, they're returning to China and India. What is Europe doing to increase its education competitiveness? Now, you've just joined this interesting European Commission group, high-level group, to focus exactly on that issue, I believe.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because I think if I would compare, Europe and US is still doing relatively okay. Europe is not, because in US, if you take like university graduates, more than 50% are non-US. In Europe, the number is 2.6% only, right? And then obviously for people to stay in Europe, it's quite tough, because I'm in the board of the international organization called ICT. They are doing internships worldwide to get most talented, students and graduates to Europe, and to get a visa. It's sometimes taking 7 to 10, months, basically. So we need to, change that, policy. One good example would be Canada. In Canada, they have a smart immigration, policy. And guess what? They have like 44% of the population is now with a university degree. And it immediately reflects in competitiveness, because Canada was not 5-7 years ago, they were not among top 20, now they are top 10, in competitiveness survey.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. Okay, Anne, we have another question from the audience for you. Do you see any chance in having a stronger or better correlation between the EU R&D framework program, which is now soon to be called Horizon 2020, and education programs such as Erasmus, Leonardus, Socrates, or the future programs that are under development, which will merge these?
Yeah, actually, I think there's a real opportunity there, because there's a lot in the Commission that is really innovative, both in funding research, and I think the big opportunity for things like the framework program, and which will become Horizon 2020, is that the European Commission can fund things that are not possible to fund in individual member states. So it's a real enabling program. I think that what we also have to do, though, is we have to kind of look out of our individual boxes in the Commission and see what's happening elsewhere, because you can't fix complicated problems by just taking a very linear approach. So we need to think, and I've been very pleased to have lots of conversations with my colleagues in DG EAC, who look at education and culture, and colleagues in RTD, which look at research, science and innovation, and to try and figure out how we work across the boundaries. So this is very much in the whole science and society agenda. And for me, and I'd have to say so, I mean, I don't have a direct responsibility here, but I would say this, that I feel that the whole concept of science and society shouldn't be seen as a separate exercise, either as part of Horizon 2020 or part of our education initiatives. It should be absolutely systemic. It should be in everything that we do, because if we don't put it in that position, that being in a central, fundamental part of everything that we do, and communicating all the innovation that we might be trying to fund, and indeed also asking the citizens what they want. You know, we're very good at funding research programs. We ask the scientists what they can do, they tell us, and we fund them. Actually, let's ask the citizen, what do citizens want? And then let's challenge our scientific community and put them in a position where there is, right at the early stage, a real buy-in, where people really want to see the output of what scientists do, and scientists know that citizens are really engaged with what they're doing. This isn't rocket science. This is simple stuff. Businesses do it all the time when they're developing new products. So why don't we do it in science?
So businesses, I guess, have deep pockets, but is it possible in an era of budget cuts everywhere, you know, is the money there to do this, to really expand the buy-in and invest in all these STEM producing initiatives?
Well, for me, I think there's a lot you can do with no funding whatsoever, but just by stimulating people to do things differently. So let's take university education, where we grow our new experimental scientists or theoretical scientists. We teach them about their specialisms. We don't teach them to communicate. Now, I let it out of the bag earlier on that I trained as a biochemist. When I was a biochemist, I received a fantastic education from the University of Edinburgh. They taught me all I know about biochemistry, but nobody taught me to communicate. And what they could easily have done is, when they were asking me to write a sophisticated essay on some specialist point of human biochemistry, they could have asked me to also produce a 100-word summary at the beginning of that essay, explaining to, let's say, a 15-year-old what the point was. Now, it's good educationally, because you actually really have to know what you're talking about to write a 100-word summary. And also, when I come out as a graduate, whether I'm a biochemist or a material scientist or a computer scientist, I will come out at the end being able to talk to anyone about what I do. That costs no money.
That's an excellent idea. We've got another question going back to the whole issue of interesting children in the natural sciences instead of placing them in front of a computer. That's from Ulrika Kunert.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think you can do both. You can get them to be interested in the natural sciences also by putting them in front of a computer. But, you know, computers are part of our lives these days, and there's a big opportunity in using information communication technology as an enabler. But, I mean, the natural sciences, I couldn't agree with you more. Let me also just say, and again, I've said it many times before, children, we are all born scientists. Every single one of us is born a scientist. We are inquisitive. We want to know more about what's going on around about us. We are born experimentalists. Part of our education system knocks that out of many of us, unfortunately, and that we have to address. And for my own part, I'm not a computer scientist, but yet I see computer technology, virtual imaging, all of these things as being fantastic ways, fantastic opportunities for allow us to explore, let's say, the natural sciences, where you can use virtual reality to, let's say, practice an operation on the human brain. Now, okay, not many of us can get to do that in real life, and we wouldn't want to practice anyway. But amazing for us to get some idea of, well, what do brain surgeons do as part of their job, or heart surgeons, any of these things. Now you can experience that kind of virtually using ICT. That's a great thing to do. So let's use both technologies.
Jan, do you want to jump in? I know that you're doing a lot of enabling initiatives also with ICT.
Yeah, what the technology will do in education are three very important, things. Number one, and Annie, mentioned a little bit about the education and class. Unfortunately, class today looks like still factory during the industrial era. Everything is unified for a good reason in the factory, but we are different, learners, and that's what, technology will enable. They will enable individual learning style, which means if you learn more from the pictures, stories, whatever, you are more right brain learner, that technology will enable that. If you learn more from the numbers, text, technology will enable that, and use that example with syndrome. Exactly, this is the how we can enable individual learning style. That's the first point, individual learning style. The second point, learning will get global. I have 16 years old daughter, and the way she learns is very different from, my era, how I learn, And if Christina is having some issue, she's not asking, me. She's having, kids around the world on Skype, and she's able, like in 3 minutes, to get, 4 kids from the 3 different continents. That's how, no, I'm not kidding, because she was always in international schools where we were traveling with our family. This is it, and that's what, technology will enable. They call also it MOOCs, massive open online, courses. There are things like, Khan Academy. I recommend everybody to look at it, 8,000, courses, perfect courses. So the second piece is the global learning. And the third piece, which technology will, enable us to do, it's like team learning. And this is also in the science, it's very important to, work together, because today's school is really not, encouraging teamwork that much, unless you're like in the sport or in the PE. Yeah, that's right. But in other disciplines, not. So those are the 3 important things what technology, will do with the education, and I believe this will change education in a very positive way.
That brings us to a very interesting concept which you've participated in, called the Assessment and Teaching of 21st Century Skills, has the unfortunate acronym of ATC21S.
Right.
It's really one of the most interesting global initiatives when it comes to modernizing education, and I don't know if you'd like to say a few words about where that initiative stands now. It's all about creating tools to measure creative problem solving and digital literacy, which is very exciting because that will enable classrooms to move into the 21st century, I think. But Jan, maybe you want to say a few words about that.
Absolutely. This is done by the support of Cisco, Intel, and Microsoft, and original countries were Australia, Finland, Singapore, and United States. Now they joined, Costa Rica and Netherlands join on. What this initiative should do to really look, and there's a couple of projects to look and assess what are the skills for the 21st century, how to, collaboratively solve, problems, how to do the ICT network literacy, the things like the way we think, the way we work, communication and collaboration, tools for working, communication technology, skills for living in this, world of the 21st century. And that would, and the result of this, discussion should input the OECD PISA study, which stands for Program for International Student Assessment, and that's how we measure 15, 16 years old students in mathematics, science, and reading, basically. And it's a biggest, thing what is done on the secondary schools, how we compare every 3 years, nations in OECD plus a couple of other countries.
So now we have 2 kids sitting at computers in separate rooms trying to solve a problem together, and actually the software can measure how well they're doing that and find out why they didn't do it well or why they did do it well. And I just think it's very exciting. I don't know if you've heard about this, Anne.
No, but it is very exciting because for me it's using technology in an imaginative way. So it's using it so that you can learn, and as Jan said something, and I just want to pick up on it, and that was this enabling individual learning, because we have a real opportunity here. When I was at school, and I'm even older than Jan, but when I was at school, you were taught as a member of a group, and if you didn't succeed, it was bad luck for you, really. We have the opportunity now in using technology to allow people to work at their own pace, to be able to develop their own interests and their ways of learning, but also you know, how many of us in life have done something and we think, you know, that didn't work so well, but you don't have the opportunity to analyze why didn't it work well, and you know, to be able to very quickly be able to assess how you can improve, how you can avoid mistakes in the future, or you can develop new ways of approaching problems. So I really like this idea that we can harness the technology to be able to deliver what we really want. That's what I like about this, and this sounds like a very good initiative.
So, and you've also said that getting adults excited about science, technology, and engineering is equally important, particularly because they influence their children's career choices. And most parents still want their kids to become doctors or lawyers, or maybe bankers. Engineering is a particularly misunderstood profession. How can policymakers help start to change attitudes about poor, abused engineers?
Okay, so engineers, let's talk about them for the minute. Engineers are the link between knowledge and the economy. That's a very exciting place to be. But one of the things I'd have to say, I have probably the best job in the world, I would argue, and so I get to speak to scientists all over Europe and elsewhere. I get to see some of the most amazing infrastructure that we've built to either look at our universe or to be able to discover the Higgs boson. And the thing that always surprises me when I visit, let's say, CERN to look at the Large Hadron Collider is the engineering. Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, something a bigger question for the start.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So the engineering is absolutely amazing. And it is not what people think, and I guess what parents think, which is, I don't want my daughter or my son to be an engineer because they'll come home in the evening with dirty fingernails and so on. That's not what engineers do. Engineers are absolutely the translators and the enablers. So we do have a big job there to describe what engineers do and what they can deliver. But there's one additional thing I would add, if I may, and that is to get parents to encourage their kids to go into science, to get citizens to have a real appetite for science. We need to address a kind of wider issue, and that is that particularly in Europe, we're nervous about new information or knowledge or new technology. We're very risk averse, to put it simply. And because of that risk averseness, we tend to shut the door and say, no, let's not do this, or let's not get involved. And we shut our door to so much opportunity, because it's great for us to know in Europe that we produce in many areas of science the best, the most impactful knowledge on the planet, and yet we don't translate that knowledge into real impact for the citizen. And that's partly because we don't communicate it well, and it's partly because the citizen feels disadvantaged and very risk averse about the knowledge that we're generating. So again, this is kind of a big area to discuss, but a really important one if we want to get people into engineering, into science, into whatever information communication technology.
Yeah, and we talked about this café scientifique, which are basically science cafes. So you come to a public setting, a cafe or a restaurant, where an eminent scientist is going to talk casually over a glass of wine about an interesting topic, just as a way to get over that hurdle of that threatening element of science.
Yeah, it's to prove that scientists are real people, but I would encourage, if you just go onto the internet and you put in Café Scientifique, you will probably find out that there is one close to you.
Oh.
And you can go along there. It's normally held once a month, and as you say, there's no PowerPoint, no technology as such. There's just a real live scientist who you can go up and touch and buy a drink if you wish. But they'll just talk about something fascinating, and they'll do it for 10 minutes, and then you can recharge your glasses and then ask them all sorts of questions. And you know, it's just social inhibition, but maybe with a drink your inhibition is lowered a little and you don't mind asking what you think might be a foolish question. And actually it's never a foolish question. But it's a very good way, one, of getting scientists out there, but two, getting the general public. They pay for the science we do, by and large. So it's getting them to ask the questions, and it's really useful for both, for the scientist and the citizen.
And you said when they were launched in Scotland, actually, that they were so popular they caused traffic jams.
Absolutely. I mean, this was a real amazing thing for me because my university is University of Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland. And when we opened our first Café Scientifique, where I gave the opening talk, it was a sellout, so standing room only, which was really heartening.
And you weren't famous then.
And then I certainly wasn't famous. But people were just curious and thought, well, you know, there's a lot of science going on in our local part of the country. Let's go and hear about it. And then that went from one Café Scientifique to once a month to eventually there are now 4 running, one about medicine, one called Café Controversial, where there's more controversial areas, and one called Country Café, and that was the one that created the literally a 2-kilometer long traffic jam, people trying to get there. Pretty good stuff. That's celebrity science, I think.
Absolutely. Jan, I want to loop back to something that Anne mentioned, which is girls and technology. And I know that Microsoft has some initiatives in this area. Is there any progress being made on that front? And does your daughter think you're a geek?
This is interesting because this is for the first time in the human history when the young generation understands and uses technology better than the current generation, including, you know, me, right? Because I can write better code. I can do better code than my daughter, but she can still use, you know, computer and all devices in a better way. So what we try to do in, you know, each and our initiative to really, you know, target all, you know, groups. As I said, you know, the one which is like the umbrella initiative is this, you know, Youth Park, where we have a couple of like pillar programs. One is called Partner Learnings, which is the software, some, you know, grants, some support for the schools. Another one, very important, is the Biz Park, which is a program for the startups, for the young entrepreneurs. Combination of software connection with the finance, you know, partners and the marketing. The other one is called Students to Business, where basically we are inviting those students to have internships at the with our, you know, partners. And in fact, the last one, which we, you know, just announced a couple of weeks ago on this, you know, grand coalition on youth of the initiative of the 4, you know, commissioners, we made a pledge, basically, Jill, that we will, you know, train and give opportunity of internship and apprenticeship to another 13,500, you know, young people in Europe.
And I hope a lot of them are girls, but...
Absolutely, absolutely. There are one of the initiatives which is part of the, you know, Youth Park, it's called DigiCareers, where we are targeting, you know, girls for the technical, you know, education and technical jobs, absolutely.
Digi-girls, I like that. Anne, what do you think it will take to get more women into the ranks of science and technology?
Well, actually, we're doing much better than we did historically in attracting women into many areas of science. We still have some real problem areas. Information communication technology is one of them, where we just don't seem to be able to attract women so well. So we need to keep up the pressure and think of ways to engage with all our young people, men and women. This is not just a matter of equality, this is a matter of future success. If we do not use all the diverse talents that we have, we won't be competitive in Europe, and also we won't be able to contribute to solving the big global issues that affect us all on the planet. And it's a real advantage that men and women approach things differently. It's a fantastic advantage in team working in science, because most of our science now is delivered in team working. It's not through individual big brains working on their own in a darkened room. And because of that team working, and I, as a career as a research scientist, and I still have a research laboratory, I know from personal experience that the young female scientists I have working with me approach problems differently, ask different questions than the young male scientists. And it is of great benefit to us as a laboratory being able to solve big, complicated problems, because we need that diversity. And I think Jan said right at the beginning that in Europe, only 15% of our graduates are STEM graduates, whereas in India with 30%, China 40%. If you take somewhere like the UK, which has a population of just over 60 million people, then in China, people with the highest, the top 1% of IQ, are more than the entire population of the UK. So we can't afford to ignore 50% of the population, the women, and expect to still be competitive. So, and even from a business point of view, as we'll have some business listeners, it is demonstrable that women who leave their employment and go off on maternity leave and return are successful, more successful when they return than people who've not had maternity leave. This is true for people who've taken paternity leave as well, because you learn all sorts of soft skills that are very useful in your work environment and make you successful. Now, that's what employers need to be thinking about, is that one, we need diversity in our workforce, and we need to support and retain the excellent people in our workforce. If we don't do that, business will be hemorrhaging money and trying to engage new bright people, which is a foolish thing for them. But as a society, we won't come up with the most imaginative solutions to our problems. So we need men and women. We need both.
Yeah, these statistics are alarming. Is there any target, Jan, in your expert group for getting STEM grads up to a certain percentage in Europe, or is it viewed as feasible at all to move the dial there significantly?
Well, I think we should move, step by step to something between 30 to 40%, which to me it's a healthy, ratio. But it will take some time, because to change this dynamics is not that easy. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was impressed by one Finnish initiative, a teenage girl who just decided that computing was really cool and wanted to make it fun and cool for other teenage girls, and did one workshop, a weekend workshop, pulling in some experts and trying to have a party around learning a bit about computer programming. And the concept went viral. It's now been replicated in many, many countries around the world, and if anyone's interested, it's called Rails Girls, R-A-I-L-S, after Ruby on Rails, the computer programming program language. And that's one initiative that seems to have just started from the grassroots, as you said, Jan, which is very important to getting excitement and enthusiasm around all these skill areas. I would like to ask Anne, you said you met recently with some scientists exploring the gravity of galaxy clusters to bend light so they could see around the corners of space. Now, this really sounds like science fiction, but maybe we just need a list of 10 projects like this or a TV program on them to get kids excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I mean about having the best job in the world. So I was able in the Atacama Desert, indeed, to speak to scientists who use galaxies like a lens to bend light. We all know about if we wear prescription glasses, for example, to focus up things that we can't normally see very well. It's exactly the same principle that's being used in space to be able to see around galaxies to what's behind them. But I think what it meant to me speaking to these young people, and these were young scientists, young men and women, is that I think it emphasized to me more than anything that science is just culture. So we need to get over the fact that people think science is something specialist done by weird people and it's not very relevant. Scientists are going to be the most imaginative people that you could meet. And scientists, if you are a scientist, it's the most creative thing you could do with your life. So it's natural that scientists would speak to other creative people in the media or music or art or sculpture and work together. And we probably need more of this. Let's as I say, break out of the box a little bit more and use other forms of communication, other media, to highlight what we do with our science in the world, which is truly amazing and is actually often stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. We're getting near the end of our time here, but we're going to take one more question from the audience, and I'd like to pose it to Jan. Jan, how can industry, corporate social responsibility efforts perhaps address this issue of an antiquated image of scientists, an inaccurate image?
Well, first of all, obviously, we have a lot of scientists in Microsoft itself. There is an excellent, we have in Cambridge, it's around 120 people, and they have an excellent, projects there. There's like one, how to fight Alzheimer's disease, the other one, how to use the big data, to fight cancer. And I think Anne mentioned those, big projects, very, visible projects, to use them, for the, not only, in our products, but for example, our, console, the Kinect console, where your console is your body, in fact, right, which is unique not only for gaming, but also for such industries like healthcare, because it will help, obviously, elderly, people, to show it and connect, this, scientific inventions with the real products on one side, but also on the other hand to show those projects and make this profession more attractive for the students, because it is true that today everybody wants to be celebrity. What does it mean? Sometimes I wonder, because what my daughter is showing me, some of those people are celebrities because they are celebrities. There is no content behind it, right? While behind each and every scientist there is a content and some invention. So we need to show what we are doing, plus to cooperate with the others, because we have, like, for example, in Cambridge, PhD program where during the summer PhDs can come and study and talk to the other scientists, and I think this is important. But the industry should play a very important role in this increasing attractiveness of the scientific professions.
Absolutely. Okay, well, it's time to wrap up, and I'd like to thank our two guests and all the participants who listened and contributed to the discussion today. There are clearly a number of interesting initiatives underway to tackle this problem of a shortage of STEM skills, and we'll be following the story. I would like to mention that a new issue of Futures magazine dedicated to the skills gap dilemma has been published today online, and you can find it with many articles on the topic under www.microsoft.eu. Futures is, of course, Microsoft's European Innovation magazine. And to conclude, once again, a warm thanks to Anne and Jan and all those who participated, and good afternoon. The webinar is now over.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.